We'll go ahead and get started. I know people are still kind of trickling in, but good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the Hive Think Tank webinar series. So my name is Olivia. I'm the operations manager at the Hive in Silicon Valley, and we're super excited to have you join us and hear from amazing expert panel speakers from NVIDIA, ServiceNow, and Uber. So with that being said, I'm going to quickly go over some of today's best practices for the webinar and explain what the Hive Think Tank does. And then I'll pass it over to Ravi, who is the Hive's founder and managing director. So we love questions. So we love for the audience to use the Q&A button and not the general chat box at the bottom of your screen to ask our presenters any questions, which they'll answer kind of throughout the panel discussion. And the event is also being recorded and will be available later on our YouTube channel. So the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of thought leaders, corporations, and entrepreneurs. We're an event and content platform with a focus on AI, cybersecurity, future of work, fintech, and so much more. So we do host events almost every other week on cutting edge topics and technology and business. So we'd love for the audience to join our meetup group and newsletter to stay up to date on some of our upcoming events. And I'll link the meetup group in the chat box below once I'm finished. And then we do also have a couple of upcoming events, which Robbie will share more details about in just a little bit. So lastly, I want to thank our sponsors, Avanta Ventures and Gamuda, for their supports. And if anyone's interested in getting involved with the Hive Think Tank, feel free to reach out to me at olivia@hivedata.com, and also make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ravi, who's the managing director, to talk more about the Hive and some of our upcoming events.
Thank you, Olivia. So just briefly, the Hive is an early stage venture capital fund, active in the seed, pre-seed, and really help entrepreneurs create companies. We're very focused on data and AI, very relevant to the topic of today. So if you are an entrepreneur who is either kind of helping create some new LLMs, vertical LLMs, or tooling around that, or for us, perhaps the best match is kind of applications. And applications is sort of broad for us. So it could be code generation, it could be workflow generation, it could be reimagining kind of apps. Please reach out to us. In addition to our presence here in the US, headquartered in Palo Alto, we have separate locations in Brazil, India, Southeast Asia, based in Malaysia, and later this year in Europe, with the Europe Fund being primarily focused on leveraging data and AI for sustainability. Next slide, please. We have two series of events that have been scheduled. The first one that today's event is part of, which is around generative AI. There are two other events that are coming up there in addition to what you see here. One on AI model security, and a second one around Intuit's GenOS, where Ashok Srivastava, the chief data scientist, will be speaking. We also have a whole series going on the future of work. And so Olivia will post a link to our meetup page, and it'd be great if you can join us. Next slide, please. So if you have a chance, please take a look at Kamesh's recent blog, and Olivia will post a link to it there. But it really gives a view of our thinking about how enterprises are going to evolve with the use of generative AI. Next, please. And so the next event is later this month. We'll have speakers from SAP, Rockset, Salesforce, and I'll be moderating this event. And the focus is on how enterprise software is evolving with the use of generative AI. Next, please. Then we have two future of work events, one with the various leaders in this space. As you probably know, there are virtual desktop as a service, more recently, very light footprint kind of browser-based solutions. And this event is going to be moderated by our good friend Harry Labana, who is at Goldman Sachs. Next, please. And following that, we have a second event with CISOs and CIOs on the future of work. And if you go to the next slide. And so with that, we have an exciting panel today, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, Kamesh Raghavendra, who will be moderating the panel to make introductions. Kamesh?
Thank you, Ravi. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel today about generative AI in the enterprise service management space. We picked up this topic because we believe that enterprise services will perhaps be the first large-scale adopter of enterprise AI, of generative AI in the enterprise. We believe the reasons are many. There has been a decade-long kind of rich platforming data workflows platforms like ServiceNow that we'll learn more about in the course of this panel. Also, the interactive nature of enterprise services typically involves human operators interacting with customers and employees. It much closely models the ChatGPT and the early consumer style generative AI applications that we have seen so far. And of course, most importantly, we believe that enterprise service management has the kind of business and technology leadership, people like the ones we have today in our panel, who will usher in a new and disruptive technology like generative AI and create the beginning of a new epoch in the enterprise, especially using generative AI to accelerate enterprise digital transformation. With that, please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. We have Rao Surapaneni from ServiceNow. He is their SVP of Engineering and Science. We have Rama Akiraju from NVIDIA, who is their Vice President of AI for IT. We have Taj Singh from Uber, who is their Head of Tech Services Products. With that, I would like to hand this over to Rao, and following Rao, the other panelists for their opening comments and nuggets from their early experience pioneering and building apps and services that use generative AI for enterprise service management. Over to you, Rao.
All right. Thank you, Kamesh. Definitely a lot more content coming up, Ravi and Olivia. That's a nice lineup you have there. Folks, Rao Surapaneni, I lead our AI part of the ServiceNow platform. ServiceNow as a workflow platform, and we've been an intelligent workflow platform for a while, helping our customers transform their internal operations, whether it is IT, HR, workplace services, legal services, across enterprise. We have delivered these solutions. With the generative AI, lot of the promises and things that have been slow to ramp up are getting accelerated. The biggest thing I see now is, instead of customers starting with prove that AI works, they're now asking us, help me use AI and transform my business. That inflection and that acceleration is definitely driving a lot more innovation, either through joint design efforts or through just innovating where it is needed. So really looking forward to share some of those insights, and looking forward to listening from my esteemed partners here. Rama, we've been working with her for a while, and Taj, who used to be my colleague a couple of times over in previous journey. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Rao. Rama, over to you.
Let me unmute myself first. Well, thank you, Kamesh and TM Ravi, for having me on this Hive Think Tank panel. It's a pleasure to be on with my colleagues from the industry, Rao and Taj here. I'm Rama Akiraju, as Kamesh introduced. I'm the VP of Enterprise AI and Automation here at NVIDIA. As you can tell, NVIDIA is at the center of the generative AI revolution as the main supplier of accelerated computing platforms and solutions. So it's an exciting time to be, an exciting place to be. I don't have to tell, I just have a couple of slides. I wanted to share, as Kamesh mentioned, the nuggets of what all I have noticed so far from exploring, experimenting, and building solutions in enterprise service management area with generative AI. We all know generative AI is transforming every part of business, right? From text generation, translation, to coding assistance, to with multi-model models, visual content, to providing accelerated discovery in life sciences. Pretty much every company out there is in some shape or form is experimenting and creating proofs of concepts, prototypes, and starting to leverage generative AI. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to kind of summarize, based on all the things that we have observed so far, 3 things. First of all, as we are navigating generative AI in the enterprise, the thing that will hit the most is how do we make sure that these foundational models that are getting trained are able to leverage the fresh enterprise knowledge. And some of the solutions that we have found useful there include employing enterprise-grade information retrieval solutions, which bring the content. And in conjunction with that, when you deploy generative AI models, either the foundational models or customized enterprise models, that combination ensures that you are bringing your enterprise knowledge. So that's one key point. I'm sure during the rest of the conversation, we'll get deep into it. I don't want to spend too much time in the introduction part, but that's one key point. Then another thing I want to point out is the cost concerns, as foundational models like GPT-4 are getting increasingly leveraged in enterprise use cases. At some point, companies will start realizing that they become too expensive at the current price point for widespread usage of those in many different use cases. So that is where more smaller domain-specific customized models may become more practical, or that the current foundational models might get more cheaper and more affordable for direct use in several enterprise use cases. Either of that or both of that may have to happen for these cost concerns, more economic concerns to come through. The third point I want to say is that enterprise guardrails and continuous learning of these models as we build them and deploy them in various enterprise use cases is going to be extremely important and critical. If we don't set those pipelines up with proper guardrails and data governance and those types of things, these models will create problems in enterprise use cases. So those are critically important. So those are the 3 points I want to kick off the discussion with. With that, I'll hand it over back to you, Kamesh.
Thanks, Rama. Over to you, Taj.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kamesh, TM Ravi, and co-panelists for having me. I'm Taj Singh. I'm a product leader at Uber and currently focused on employee experience and service management, working with our IT and people orgs. In the past, I've led post-purchase customer experience products powered by AI, whether NLP applied to chatbots for onboarding at Uber, or predictions applied to determining why the customer contacting a brand. In some of the previous companies I worked at. In terms of Uber's ML journey, we've come a long way from the early days of ML and AI, when supervisor was the only approach and processing power was limited. We are at a point of inflection, as Rao mentioned, and certainly counterbalanced by some of the guardrails. Brahma actually stated, in this new world, we are leveraging our current data and platform prowess to, and our discipline that already exists at Uber on experimentation and setting up infrastructure and framework to deliver on some low-hanging use cases, like you mentioned, in the enterprise they are. But these use cases, like simple things like classification, summarization, where human interaction is a natural part of the workflow, so it can curtail any deviations produced by this very rapidly evolving technology. We're also partnering with our tech partners, ServiceNow. Rao worked in the past, like you mentioned, but now ServiceNow is our vendor to leverage the power of LLMs natively and in IT applications such as ITSM and HRSD. Pretty excited about this conversation this afternoon, and looking forward to the dialogue. Back to you, Kamesh.
Thanks, Taj. That's a great segue into use cases and where you're seeing real enterprise adoption. things like search, text completion, NLP-based use cases have been around for a while. In fact, more than 10 years ago, Google tried to launch enterprise search product, which had mixed results back then. What do you think has changed with generative AI that has made some of these use cases come back again with more promise and obviously kind of more kind of investment and adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. I'll start with search and also hear from the other, co-panelists. Search particularly, there's a lot of hype and noise, and I feel, the jury is actually out, whether search will replace traditional search. In my mind, and as some experts have said, generative AI will actually complement it, not really replace it. Search in the consumer world has always been on the forefront of innovation, unlike enterprise search. And with enterprise search, we are usually at the mercy of collaboration suites and a few vendors, who actually offer enterprise search. Since the enterprise search has never had a great, necessarily ROI associated with it, unless it's tied to enterprise apps and within the enterprise apps, such as CRM, HRSD, file storage, etc. I believe generative AI LLMs will finally change, and pretty excited about that because we'll actually, see, outcomes that employees have been looking for from an enterprise search. That said, I think it's important to also maybe step back and look at the difference between search and Gen AI. I think most of people might know here very well. I don't have search background, mostly worked on, some of the products that I mentioned related to AI, but the purpose of search is to retrieve information, surfacing something that already exists. Generative AI on the other end is generative, creating something new based on what the models have been trained on. And it feels like search because you start with a question. Clearly, the use case is a bit different for the two technologies. That said, there are searches that when you do, you're actually doing a generative search. That part of search we feel is going to be taken away. Like, if I am trying to send an introduction email to a person who's joined my staff, I could do a search for it. I'm still talking about consumer search, and now I can, that will get taken over by, I would say generative AI applications. Coming back to the enterprise need, I see transformation happening in areas of experience as well as productivity. Experience-wise, search will, not just be about documents, but what's within the documents, and the results will be, I think this is the great part of it, will be actually succinctly presented, unlike list of links that you have to sort of go through. Also, experience-wise, search will come to you within apps, like it is with consumer space. What the consumer space called it unbundling. When you basically search not in Google but in Facebook and Amazon. We feel a similar thing is going to happen in whether it's productivity suites within G Suite or narrower search related items in CRM. So that is also an interesting part experience as you're going to see. One of the things from an IT side where I'm partnering closely with, I think we are at least anticipating significant productivity increases. I had some stats I was looking up where Gartner had said about 1/3 of employees can't find the information they're looking for, and 44% of employees make, I think that's 44% of employees make wrong decision because they're unaware of the information, which could have easily been accessible. So we believe that enterprise will really, help in that front. Lastly, Q&A, I'm personally really excited about it. My background has been on chatbots where they were sort of struggling. And this really brings, Q&A related experience really to the fore. I'm actually advising a company called DVSum, which does Q&A for business intelligence and slicing, dicing sales data, etc. So I feel you're going to see proliferation of vendors like that. We are also working very closely with, vendors like ServiceNow and maybe Rao, you can talk a little bit more about how, from an HRSD, ITSM, you're thinking about it, which you'll be using through your product.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for that segue there. Definitely all in on generative AI and across the spectrum of the users of our platform. We are looking at within an enterprise as a ServiceNow platform, we have end users, your employees or your customers, which may be external. we have the agents, whether it is an IT agent or somebody answering HR benefits question. You have the admins who manage and maintain admins and developers who build experiences, either using ServiceNow platform or other platforms. So we do look at the spectrum of those user personas. The adoption rate and the comfort level varies depending on the level of that user. So the way we think about is the generative AI capabilities, we still need to go through a human in the loop experience. That's why we call our products Assist and Now Assist for a variety of these personas. So look at it as an agent assist, a developer assist, or a requester assist. The adoption is much easier when you have a human in the loop, that too an expert human in the loop. What we are seeing is a faster adoption on the developer side. You have a developer who is implementing something, when we can help them produce a ServiceNow platform code or the associated JavaScript code faster. They're still motivated to test it, verify it. There's another cycle with QE, and then off they go. Through that cycle, we can make them more productive. Similar thing on the agent side. They are motivated and incentivized to give the right answer to the customers, to their end users, whether via coming through live chat or other experiences. Giving them the assistance to get the right information faster is making them more productive. So those we are seeing fast adoption, and the end user side of it, whether it is through search or chatbot, with the possibility of the hallucination, it is still, there's more work to be done to get the users over the hump and to get the enterprises over the hump in deploying it. But we are seeing activity across all kinds of personas.
So I think this unification is quite unique between search, Q&A, self-help, information retrieval, discovery. And therefore, it feels like a new style of consumption model that's firming up because of generative AI and language models, which also then goes back to the content creation, generation, code generation side, which has been traditionally human generated at the time of setup and then retrieved again and again from the consumption standpoint. Rama, I would love to hear your opinion about how the content code generation converging into the same type of model setup is changing the whole kind of service workflow definition, and also the economics of being able to generate content on demand versus previously, generate once and then retrieve on demand.
Yeah, I before I get to that part of it, I also wanted to comment on this search and self-help discovery discussion that we just had. I feel that the boundaries between search and chatbot question answering and discovery, which used to be done in different places with different tools in enterprises, is actually those barriers are down with generative AI, because you can now have the kind of quality that really improves employee productivity with the same technology that you can answer search, you can do question answering, you can actually enable conversational interfaces to business applications and offer them in context where work is getting done using this pattern that's very widely emerging as co-pilots, right? And that's what we'll get into code as well. So it's going to be very interesting and transformative for companies as they start to embrace this generative AI technology to bring all of those things together, and especially as enterprise search information retrieval companies increasingly adapt these, the new wave of innovations possible with the finding information and natural language understanding that's now possible, where we can bring search and conversations and chats and the notion of virtual assistants together now with multiple modalities like speech based, asking the question and getting a response, and conversing with virtual assistants and avatars joining your meetings or showing up to personalize things for you. So the possibilities going from search to just embracing that search in all aspects of self-help and discovery are quite exciting, I would say. And going back to the question that you asked me in the context of code and how that area of generating code is changing, we all know there are already co-pilots for code, starting with GitHub Copilot. My ServiceNow has this 2 generations of star coder models already out there that are performing quite well by all means of benchmarking. So there is and of course GPT-4 demonstrations already show that you can get a lot of code either in generating starter code segments or debugging or finding the root cause and those sort of things given a segment of code, or finding similar bugs in a piece of piece of code. You say, are there bugs similar to this and how have they been fixed? And you can ask those types of things. So there are many things that open up in the area of code and code assistance as well. And we are going to see a lot more of these, notions of co-pilots coming up, not only for specifically, say, code assistance and, all things related to code, but beyond the coding task itself, the collaboration around coding and collaboration around, programming. You want to talk to a particular colleague, you want to know whether that particular colleague, if you say, for example, somebody new joined or it's a large team and somebody else is assigned to a particular task, you want to know what time zone that person is in. From within that, co-pilot interface, you should be able to seamlessly ask either a code support question or say, hey, who is this colleague, which time zone are they in, who do they interact with? If that person is not available, gone on vacation, who else could I be interacting with to get better understanding of this part of the code? Bringing all of those aspects of conversations, chatbots, enterprise chatbots into a single virtual assistant for employees is now a possibility. It's actually in the realm of doable. And I think that opens up a lot more opportunities for these, the previously elusive employee productivity, right? You were saying, Taj, that, enterprise search never really got that good because there was never that big of, economic incentive to invest that much in it. But now with, employee productivity across, so many different dimensions, coming together and the possibilities with technology, and tools coming up, I think economic incentives for increased employee productivity probably are coming together, and so the possibilities are enormous, I would say.
Absolutely. In the blog that Ravi mentioned earlier, I comment that perhaps in a year's time, just by looking at the earnings per share of a public company, you can gauge the level of adoption of generative AI, given the deepest extent of impact on all kinds of employee productivity metrics. The previous attempt towards this type of employee productivity was the wave of robotic process automation and service process automation in general. Rao, would love to hear your perspective on how would you characterize this wave? How is it different from the previous waves like RPA?
So I would say this is, from a technology capability point of view, it is a leap forward, right? So it's a discontinuous improvement over whatever the previous generations were. But applying that using the right experience and the right engineering is when the magic happens. Being able to leverage this, let's say compared to an RPA, it is good automation, but being able to handle that in a far better way using generative AI, whether it is ambiguous but conversational and being able to meet the users where they are, I think that's where it helps the automation go to that next level. And that's how we're looking at it in terms of how can we deflect more, how can we empower the users more with self-service, because we're able to serve them with just the right answer at the right time, instead of giving them a list of links to go through, which they may or may not do, right? So being able to provide that succinct information when they need it is what will drive that next level of automation and self-service.
Awesome. Thanks, Rao. When you think of enterprise services, it's perhaps the most human-centric side of the enterprise. And with obviously so much talk about the future of the human operator or the role of human work. Obviously, we are not trying to say that it will eliminate the need, but the need will definitely change radically, as we have seen in other forms of automation. Between all the three of you, would love to know more about your perspective. How do you see the future of the human operator in the context of all the things we're talking about? Rao, maybe we can start with you and go through Rama's and Taj's perspectives.
So we do look at how we are helping those human operators or the agents or the builders. We look at it as we are actually seeing productivity gains across the board. Business are looking at what can we do more with these human beings, right? So there are always extra long call waits if you are a customer service agent. There's business SLAs that can be improved. So the human operators, as they are being assisted by this technology, they're simply more productive. Of course, we need to get it right, both from an experience point of view and the content point of view. But it's that productivity gain that is going to drive the business itself to re-envision how they want to deploy that extra capacity. We've seen customers simply focus on, okay, I can now reduce my target wait times. Now I can do more with the same agent. So definitely seeing that applying this freed up capacity, where else we can apply and how else we can innovate. I know, Rama, you are at the kind of forefront of actually seeing it live. What do you see?
Yeah, Rao, thanks for that question, passing that on to me. So yeah, I can comment on it from two perspectives. One is from human operator as a user of generative AI. And in there, which is what you're specifically alluding to, we can take one specific example of, say, IT incident that's happening, and you want to be able to get quick help. So let's say we were able to summarize all the previous tickets succinctly, and as the employee is asking a question, either at a chat bot or with a service desk agent, hopefully even before it gets to service desk agent, you provide responses saying, hey, somebody else asked similar type of question, here is a suitable response, and right there you have maybe 7 to 8 minutes of call time that got reduced for the service desk teams, and they can use that time effectively for addressing more complex questions, perhaps for users, or go do something else. As an SRE, site reliability engineer, you can go and maybe implement a new feature for a new the product or whatnot. So that is one aspect of it. That is people are getting the productivity, efficiency improvements, and then therefore you can use that time for doing more high value tasks and work. Then I can also interpret the question from another perspective, the role of human operators in this. As generative AI models are being deployed, what role do humans or engineers play still in developing those systems and models, right? There, if I interpret that and where that angle of the role of human in this whole thing, there is still quite a bit of human oversight and control that's required, as the models are being built, to ensure that they're ethical, responsible, and if we are doing customization of these models for an enterprise, then preparing the data, curating the data, that ensuring that it's representative, and then training the model still. fine tuning and calibrating the models and handling the edge cases or for ambiguity and those sort of things, and establishing the continuous training and learning pipelines. So there is a set of activities that are at bootstrap level as you're building these generative AI models as a company that's taking a platform like ServiceNow, trying to improve their enterprise service processes. The platform will provide some of these, but you still have to, fine tune them and test them on your data and calibrate them and all that. So that's the bootstrap time. And then at runtime, ensuring that the models are not drifting, and if there are errors that users are reporting, being able to deal with them and properly, and ensure that the feedback is going into the systems, and the system is set up with proper data controls for legal and regulatory compliance. So those are all things that are still there for humans to do, some of which are bootstrap time, one-time things perhaps, and some are ongoing continuous things. So hopefully I've brought out the other side of things. Rao, you were talking about the end user and the productivity gains, and I'm talking about as a user, as a consumer of platforms like ServiceNow. Companies may still have to have humans in the loop to deploy and manage these generative AI workflows.
Yeah, and just to add, I think I absolutely agree with the shifting of where more humans will be required in terms of data preparation, etc. Things, Rama, that you said. And I'll give one example where we are, in fact, using humans to even help with the introduction of the technology, because, and this may be even addressing the first or the second question I see, how do you consider and manage hallucinations? Because one of the use cases we have, and as we know, support is one of the foremost use cases for LLMs, is we are doing summarization before bot hands off to a human. But there in itself, there comes a check. You can check whether it is doing it the right way, and there's a feedback loop there. So to me, humans are, that intervention is also helping with the adoption of technology. It's a kind of interesting use case, but it really helps us introduce to us. That's also a low-hanging use case that you can start with. So just wanted to give that very practical use case that is currently I think it's in pilot or beyond pilot, with us at this point, where we see this very interesting, role of human operators and even introduction of technology.
Yeah, not to mention, the new role, which is while doing development and tuning, new role of prompt engineering, which is the new programming language to work with generative AI models. And it's interesting that to note how sensitive the output of these LLMs can be, depending on what instructions you give and what prompts you give. So there is likely a whole new set of roles that are emerging in the industry for adopting and managing these generative models and their corresponding workflows.
Absolutely. And from the looks of the early job openings, it looks like they pay like 3 times more than the average Bay Area pay scale prompt engineering roles. So it looks like there's a whole new skill set that's emerging as these technologies get adopted.
We all thought, the content writing and the writers' jobs are going to go, and the prompt engineering actually requires that creative touch. So if only they can jump on this, those content writers can now become prompt engineers, especially if they bring in some domain knowledge from their specific domains, the medical, healthcare, IT. They can bring in a tremendous amount of value.
Absolutely. So talking about assets that an enterprise develops because of generative AI, it looks like data is going to become even more strategic than it already has been. Even looking at the lawsuits that have been filed on OpenAI type of use cases, it looks like there is an increased awareness of the value of data that an enterprise, or even an individual for the matter, in the case of OpenAI, has generated or has kind of aggregated together. And being at NVIDIA, you would have seen enterprises rethink their way of evaluating their data, how they feel generative AI can amplify differentiation based on the data that they already have. Would love to know your perspectives, Rama, on how do you see enterprise data becoming a new or a more highly valued asset driven by generative AI?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at data in an enterprise, right, there are two kinds of data, or you could say three, depending on how you split it up: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured, right? Much of focus for a good chunk of the century, if you will, has been unstructured data, right? There's been tremendous amount of progress in in relational databases, and how do you more effectively and with a lot of performance optimization store, retrieve data in structured databases and derive insights from it with dashboards, and there is a whole slew of product suites in that space, right? And information management under structured data management. Now, what generative AI has done to the unstructured world, which started as the more I would say probably the right word is more handcrafted type of solutions, like where we were going after for unstructured data, for deriving insights from unstructured data. We were going after, recognizing named entities, then recognizing, concepts, and then slowly getting to understanding the syntax and then the semantic roles and those types of things. And that's kind of how the natural language understanding has been. Generative AI, BERT, and all the advancements that came along now changed the game. Now you can unleash the value of the unstructured data in an enterprise, or even semi-structured data, which is where much of enterprise data, good chunk of enterprise data resides, like in ServiceNow, with semi-structured fields and a lot of unstructured data in those semi-structured fields. And then 80% of the rest of the data, which is unstructured, which is in documents, PDFs, and all that. So you now have access to deriving insights from all of that. So it's what enterprises can do with it now is tremendous. We've been talking about it as an industry for the past decade or so, when natural language understanding advancements have been happening, but more slowly. But now with generative AI, I think we are set up well to really bring together to derive the structured, unstructured, semi-structured data, to derive insights from it. Some examples that I can think of that enterprises can now go after that would not have been possible before, would be to, personalize a lot of things, personalize recommendations, not only based on, structured data that resides in their enterprise, transaction, but by looking at, people's preferences and other things that they are, expressing on social media, right? So that opens up, bringing these two things together opens up a lot more things you can do for personalization. With multi-model models, you can think of immersive and more, interactive user experiences, be it in coding, programming assistance, be it in generating content in using Office suites, or in travel, transportation, or tourism industry with virtual tours, and those sort of things. And of course, chatbots will proliferate everywhere as conversational virtual agents help you unlock content and be able to quickly extract as well as generate summaries for you. Then you can think of, in the enterprise service management domain, because that's the focus of this panel, you can think of personalizing things for new employees, HR processes, how you can provide more personalized training for employees, and more inclusive language in job postings. Already there are tools like Textio that people use, but now you can take it to a whole new level to ensure that your job postings are appealing to everybody, and you can overcome biases in the way you talk about job postings. In employee communication channels, Slack or whatnot, automated moderations of user comments, and automatic summarization, and combining that with some action items that were taken before, and mixing that all up with your structured data that talks about which customers you had meetings with when, and such, and CRM tools, and bringing it all together to really personalize your communications to your customers, checking for compliance in pricing and ensuring that the underwritten policies are. So there are a whole slew of things that now open up when you can bring structured data and unstructured data together.
Awesome. Rama, I think the way you narrated it, we moved from thinking of generative AI as a productivity enabler to being an innovation enabler. Like, what new things can creators and developers within the enterprise start building, which are powered by generative AI? And looking at the frenzy of innovation out there in the market, whether it's from academia, whether it's from entrepreneurs, the amount of new innovative ideas that we hear every day, every week, it feels like a year's worth of cloud or big data, old style innovation is being packed every week over the last few months, and the way the market is evolving. So there have been a lot of questions about security, hallucinations, different aspects of generative AI beyond just the GPT, OpenAI type model. So what we decided as a panel is to address this in a way, where we kind of go through the spectrum of options available today in terms of generative AI technologies, and analyze them with respect to cost. As Rama had noted in her opening comments, there is a very stark cost angle, and different choices have different types of cost consequences. It's a new technology, so there is obviously a very interesting risk angle. We saw a bunch of questions about cybersecurity, questions about hallucination, questions about data management, IP, trade secrets, so on and so forth. So there are many elements of risks that are unique to generative AI, and some elements like cybersecurity that are common to any new technology being adopted. And these risks vary across different models of generative AI technologies available in the market. And of course, whenever it comes to enterprise, there is an element of enterprise readiness. Is this technology ready to be adopted with enterprise SLAs and guarantees? Is there enough support available? Is there enough talent available? So there is an additional lens of enterprise readiness that comes into the picture. So to answer such a involved and complex question, we decided to kind of divide the spectrum of enterprise generative AI technologies into three loosely kind of broad segments. The first segment is around pre-trained large language models, whether they're hosted by the developer like OpenAI API, or it's hosted by a partner, like a Microsoft Azure hosting a large language model like that from OpenAI. And this is kind of the pre-trained nature and the large scale of these. That's why the large language models, they are distinctive features of this segment of generative AI technologies. A second segment is more interesting, which is frameworks that enable enterprises to train with their own data. So the ability for an enterprise to use their internal data and train proprietary in the sense they're not open, they're proprietary to the enterprise. And therefore they can provide unique functions which a public trained large language model cannot provide. Leaders like NVIDIA have very sophisticated frameworks which have been there even before the dawn of this wave of generative. So they're very kind of baked, mature AI training frameworks that are now available to train using enterprises' internal data, specific and uniquely functional language models. And then, of course, thirdly, there is a broader, very active spectrum of open models. And for example, there are some options like the Meta Facebook Llama, which can be both a training framework hosted by a service provider, or it could be on request open model directly accessible by a developer or an enterprise. And therefore, the whole open source movement is yet another kind of fascinating landscape. So just to put a framework around this question, it took me like 4 or 5 minutes. And the fortune that we have today is that all our panelists are not just business leaders and thought leaders, they're also practitioners. They have dealt with almost all the vendors out there in the landscape. They understand the most bleeding edge advantages and risks of all these technologies. So we have kind of organized this segment to learn from our panelists and go through these 3 kind of broad segments and the opinions from our panelists. So maybe Rao, with you, we can start off with the large language models and the hosted large language models. And we've seen some announcements from ServiceNow with Microsoft Azure, OpenAI. Would love to know your opinion on the cost, risk, and enterprise readiness of this segment of generative AI technologies.
Sure. Yeah, that's a nice framing. I'll speak a little bit with a personal opinion and a little bit of how we are approaching as ServiceNow strategy. OpenAI and the GPT 3.5 or 4, they're definitely the leading edge, and they demonstrate the art of possible at the highest end. Now, we do experiment with them, we do prototype with them, and we do have some product releases that leverage those. Our approach is, it ultimately depends on what the business aims to do for anybody. Our approach is, our customers should be able to use innovation no matter where it is coming from. So we consider ourselves to be a platform of platforms. So we enable our customers to use OpenAI where it makes sense for them. In addition, we also want to have our capabilities for our core use cases and expanding list of use cases where we can deliver better performance at better value using the experiences that we can only build. So, and we've been fortunate to have added a bunch of acquisitions over time, including the last one, Element AI, that brought in an amazing research team. And that's the one that Rama was alluding to. We have a partnership with Hugging Face, where we have built a couple of iterations of what we call a star coder models that provide capability for our code generation, and then some of the text-to-text scenarios. We've been using that and enhancing, and the next layer to that is using the data that we have access to and only we have access to. Applying a case summary or a IT incident summary at scale is how we can make it differentiated and make it useful for across the spectrum of our customers. So look at that. In addition, the open source models, the space has been exploding like anything. There's always something new to learn. We continue to evaluate, we continue to work with the partners. Where it is appropriate, we do partner and engage and deliver value to our customers. So that's how we look at it. We want to look at the best of the breed, the art of possible. We want to drive value where we can and partner where we need to and want to.
And I love the way you differentiated between the experience, data, and the source of the model. And it looks like it's almost like a business stack, and an enterprise owning its experiences, monetizing the data that it uniquely has, and sourcing the model technology from wherever it's the best, whether it's open source or OpenAI, Microsoft, or training framework out there.
Yeah, well, one question Anthony Pina had on the chat too. Yeah, how can we differentiate? To me, the models, you can still differentiate using the model if you have the data and the pipeline and the organization that can deliver value. Ultimately, you still need whatever your differentiator is without an AI or a LLM capability, right? So for us, that is a workflow platform, and the LLMs and what we are doing simply amps that up. For other companies, it could be something else. So you always want to think about what is that other differentiator, not just the LLM aspect of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rama, would love to hear your opinion, particularly also your comments on the cost and how between these three models, cost to train, cost to inference varies, and how should an enterprise think through the cost aspect?
Yeah. So Rao put it very well already. There are use cases and places where you want to experiment with the best of the art of the possible right now, which is say GPT-4. You want to see how far you can push a particular use case. But very quickly you'll realize that, and I'll just give some example. You'll realize that the cost economics may not work out always. So let's take a chatbot. If you build a GPT-4 call, typically, you probably need, two LLM calls to answer a question, or in one iteration. One to understand the intent, to determine, whether to route it through enterprise knowledge or to open domain, or to whichever other things, because your chatbot will likely do many things in the enterprise. So you want to know what kind of the question is it to route it. And then another one is to really do the summarization based on the information retrieval. Two calls put together will likely cost about 30 cents to answer a question. Now you add that up to say 5,000 employees asking 10 questions a day itself starts to get into millions of dollars of range per year. Now this is just for chatbot. Now let's say you have a mid-sized company, 20,000, 50,000 employees, 100,000 employees, bigger than that, then this runs into multiple millions of dollars just for chatbot. Now you add that to other use cases like say ticket summarization or root cause analysis and auto ticket routing and many other things, code generation and code assistance, this and that. Pretty soon it will be multi-million dollars, and perhaps the employee productivity that you get will not justify investing in this much generative AI foundational models, open domain model calls. The system may be performing really well. It may be answering questions really well, really contributing to employee productivity, but the cost economics may not work out. So something has to happen here where either this costs of the current price point where they're being offered goes down drastically, but they can only go down as low as the GPU costs and the maintenance of these and building of these, and they can only go as much. At some point, they'll probably become a commodity, being offered by only a select set of companies who can afford to train these models and manage them, keep them fresh at certain scale. But even so, the cost economics may not work out. So what are the alternatives to leverage it? Maybe smaller models that are more custom for specific domains and specific use cases that individual departments and organizations can manage themselves, that are built off of more cheaper, affordable models, which have been custom trained, so the quality is still just as good or close enough to be practical to be used in applications, or build off of the open source models, and then you still bear the costs of hosting it, customizing it, and using it in your enterprise, but it's not as expensive. So somewhere this balance has to kind of settle itself. It's kind of going this way, that way. I mean, people are starting to experiment now, this customized models with domain-specific data. It is still a laborious process because you still have to collect data, you still have good quality data, train it, depending on whether you have to do instruction training or reinforcement learning based on human feedback, or you still have to have all of those mechanisms built out for companies to use it. So here is where NVIDIA is really focused on to say, hey, we'll supply the hardware accelerated compute for everybody who wants to build the foundational models, the big models. That's fine. Go use it. We've built our own with Megatron models, but we want to really help customers in the spaces in different and specific domains to see how they can bring their own data to customize. But in doing so, they don't have to know so much of all of the inner workings of it. So build a platform. We call that NEMO under that brand name, NeMo foundational models upon which you can bring your own data. And there are tools and APIs that are available. So you don't have to know all of the inner workings. So you choose the parameters and you say you bring in the data and you build your own models and deploy. So customers are starting to try those things out. You know, I would say it's still early days to say how close they are to the the likes of GPT-4, which are performing really well on many use cases, even without any customization, right? And that's really the traction with that. But nevertheless, I think over time, I cannot predict future unless we do more experiments, we'll see. But definitely we need to do more of these experiments to see how well the smaller models that are custom trained for specific use cases will work. If they are good and close, I think they may be more viable tools and models to use for enterprise use cases. Open source ones, of course, are great, and of course, NVIDIA also supports those on its and optimized on NVIDIA hardware. So companies can also take advantage of some of those types of optimized models, open source models, which may be more cost effective.
Thank you, Rama. I think it's just the breadth of options available and so many parameters to optimize for. Thank you so much for laying out that landscape. I know we are running on top of the hour, but I do want to give Taj 30 to 60 seconds, a quick kind of quip and a comment on enterprises engaging with the open source. I think even in the prior kind of waves of big data and cloud computing, open source played a pivotal role in adoption and maturation of technology. Taj, would love to hear your kind of quick comments on how do you see open source shaping generative AI in the enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. A speed round there. In fact, Rama covered part of it. I club open source and small models sort of together. I think it gives you that advantage of, some of the things that you could have struggled with in the cloud, which a lot of questions are about: transparency, explainability, privacy, security, etc. But it comes with its, also disadvantage of cost of running it, tuning, deploying, etc. But I think, to what you said, we are exactly in that stage right now. We have OpenAI, but we also have our own models that we have created. So we are testing that. So probably in a few weeks, a couple of months, we'll have that data available. Like, is it really working out or not? At the end of the day, it's going to be the business outcome, right? How you're really getting the business outcome that I referred to earlier with whichever option. So, and of course, open source comes with, like I said, we have a machine learning sort of, workbench and infrastructure and people that we can do that. Not everybody would have that. So I think the jury's still out, but it just gives you a lot more. It answers a lot of the questions here around privacy and security, which we are pretty excited about using the open source, whether it's Falcon, Llama, or some of the others, Databricks.
Awesome. So Rao, Rama, Taj, thank you so much for joining us today. Even in the course of this discussion, we could see the community, the innovation community that's firming up, even between the three of you, your kind of partnerships across enterprises. We are very fortunate to have you join our think tank, our community here at the Hive. And also, everyone, thank you so much for joining us and staying along, although we shot over the top of the hour. Thanks a lot for all the questions. We look forward to your participation in future think tank events and look forward to meeting you all soon again. Over to you, Ravi and Olivia.
Thank you all. And thank you for your patience for staying a few minutes over. We will see you soon at the end of the month. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.